Sometimes the most revealing moments happen when nobody expects them. There was no dramatic setup. No teaser. No moment where the studio lights dimmed and the music swelled to signal big reveal. It was just Kelly Ripa sitting next to her husband Mark Consuelos on a random Thursday morning, casually admitting something that made an entire live studio audience, and millions of viewers at home, lean in a little closer. That's the thing about Kelly Ripa. She doesn't need a headline-grabbing scandal to capture attention. She just needs to be honest. On the August 20th episode of Live with Kelly and Mark, the conversation drifted, as it often does, into nostalgia. The couple started talking about the pandemic years, that strange stretch of time when the entire show had to be filmed from home, hosts speaking into laptop cameras instead of studio lenses, guests appearing in little digital boxes instead of walking out from behind a curtain. For most people, that era is something we've collectively tried to move past. But for Kelly, it clearly left behind a few stories she'd been saving. And on this particular morning she decided to share one of them. She admitted that during those work-from-home broadcasts, she wasn't exactly dressed for a formal appearance. On camera she looked polished from the waist up, blouse, hair, makeup, the whole package. But below the frame? Nothing. She was hosting a nationally broadcast morning show in a blouse and comfort, nothing more, and nobody watching ever had a clue. It's the kind of confession that could have easily been left in the past. Nobody was pressing her for it. Nobody in the audience shouted out a question demanding to know what she wore during quarantine broadcasts. She simply chose to say it out loud, live on television, the same platform that made her famous for saying exactly what's on her mind. And that's really the moment worth sitting with. Not the confession itself, but the choice to make it. Why does a detail like this matter? On the surface, it's just a funny story. A little wardrobe secret from a strange chapter in television history. But if you look a little closer, it says something much bigger about who Kelly Ripa actually is, and why audiences have stayed loyal to her for decades. Kelly has built an entire career on removing the wall between herself and the camera. Other hosts perform a version of themselves. Kelly, more often than not, seems to simply be herself, unfiltered, mid-thought, mid-laugh, willing to let viewers see the parts of her life that most public figures would edit out entirely. That's not a small thing in an industry built on control and image management. It's actually a kind of quiet bravery. There's a reason this kind of story spreads the way it does. It isn't really about the specific detail, it's about permission. When someone as recognizable as Kelly Ripa admits to something so relatable, so human, so unglamorous, it gives everyone watching a strange sense of comfort. Because if she can say it on live television in front of millions of people, then maybe the rest of us don't have to feel so embarrassed about the messier, more human parts of our own lives either. That's the emotional undercurrent running beneath almost everything Kelly does on that show. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real, even when real is a little chaotic, a little unpolished, a little funny in hindsight. And then there's Mark. Watching the two of them together during moments like this is its own kind of storytelling. Mark Consuelos doesn't try to steer Kelly away from these confessions. He doesn't look uncomfortable or rush to change the subject. Instead, he leans into it, laughs, reacts the way a genuinely amused spouse reacts. Not a co-host managing brand safety, but a husband who has clearly heard these stories before and still finds them funny every single time. That dynamic is worth pausing on because it's rare. A lot of celebrity couples who work together seem to perform partnership for the cameras. With Kelly and Mark, it often feels like the opposite, like the cameras are simply capturing something that would be happening at their kitchen table anyway, just with better lighting. It's part of why so many longtime viewers say the show feels different since Mark joined permanently. There's an ease to their exchanges. An unspoken rhythm. The kind of chemistry that can't really be scripted, because it was built over nearly 3 decades of actual marriage before it ever became television content. And that brings up something else Kelly has talked about publicly, something that, when placed next to this pantsless confession, tells an even richer story about their relationship. In a separate conversation, Kelly admitted that even after all these years, Mark has one habit that drives her a little crazy on air. He sometimes tunes her out mid-conversation, the same way any spouse might after years of marriage. She said she has to catch his attention and remind him, essentially, that they're being paid to actually listen to each other right now. It's a small, funny admission. But it's also deeply telling. Because it means the version of Kelly and Mark we see on screen isn't a performance of marriage, it's an actual marriage complete with its very real, very ordinary friction. The zoning out. The gentle nudge to pay attention. The playful exasperation that comes from truly knowing somebody, flaws and all, after decades together. That's probably the real reason audiences can't look away from these moments. It's not the wardrobe story itself, and it's not even the gentle marital ribbing. It's the sense that we're witnessing something genuinely unscripted in an entertainment landscape that's increasingly curated, filtered, and managed. Kelly/Ripa built a career on being the exception to that trend, and every time she shares something this candid, she reinforces exactly why people trust her. There's also something worth noting about timing. This particular confession came not long after Kelly had been away from the show recovering from a gum graft procedure, resting at home under doctor's orders not to speak. When she eventually opened up about that experience too, explaining with her usual self-deprecating humor that years of overzealous toothbrushing had led to the surgery, it followed the same pattern. A private, slightly embarrassing, deeply human detail, offered up without hesitation because hiding it never seemed to occur to her in the first place. Put those two moments side by side, the pantsless work-from-home confession and the very candid explanation for her dental surgery, and a clearer picture starts to form. Kelly/Ripa doesn't treat her home life as something separate from her public life. She treats it as material, as connection, as a bridge between herself and the people watching. Many viewers noticed this pattern long ago, and it's part of why the show feels less like a broadcast and more like catching up with a friend who happens to have amazing stories. It also says something about trust, the trust she has in her audience and the trust her audience has placed in her over the years. You don't share a story about hosting a live broadcast without pants unless you genuinely believe your audience will laugh with you, not at you. That kind of confidence doesn't come from ego. It comes from decades of a relationship with viewers who have shown, again and again, that they're not there to judge her. They're there because they like who she actually is. There's something almost cinematic about watching that trust play out in real time. The studio lights. The easy laughter. Mark's reaction beside her. The audience's collective realization that they're getting something honest instead of something rehearsed. It's a small moment in the grand scheme of a career that spans decades, but it's also a perfect distillation of everything that's made Kelly/Ripa a fixture in American mornings for so long. Some fans wondered aloud in the days following the episode, whether Kelly even thinks before she shares things like this, or whether it simply comes naturally to her after so many years in front of a camera. It's hard to know for certain. But it almost seems like at this point in her career, the line between on-air Kelly and off-air Kelly has nearly disappeared altogether. What you see is what you get. And for a television landscape that so often rewards polish over honesty, that's become one of her most valuable qualities. It's easy to scroll past a story like this and think of it as nothing more than a funny headline. A celebrity said something amusing on a morning show, so what? But moments like this endure in a way that bigger, flashier headlines often don't, precisely because they aren't trying to be dramatic. They're trying to be true. Perhaps the reason so many people remain invested in Kelly&Mark isn't simply because they've spent decades in the spotlight. It's because audiences continue to see something genuine in the way they navigate life together, cameras or no cameras. The inside jokes. The teasing. The willingness to admit the unglamorous parts of marriage, motherhood, work, and everyday life without flinching. And maybe that's why moments like this stay with viewers long after the cameras stop rolling. Not because of what was said, but because of what it revealed about who they really are underneath all those years on television. So here's a question worth sitting with. What is it about Kelly&Mark's honesty that keeps people coming back morning after morning, year after year? Is it the humor? The chemistry? The comfort of watching a marriage that feels real in a world of curated relationships? Whatever it is for you, it's worth sharing. Drop a comment with your favorite Kelly&Mark moment, the one that made you feel like you were watching something genuinely real instead of just another television segment. Because if this story proves anything, it's that the smallest, most human confessions are often the ones that end up meaning the most.